Hi guys, my name is Karol Moros and you're watching Make Programming Fun Again. This is the sixth part of my full stack Elixir series. Over the past 5 videos we have built from scratch a React to-do list talking to a GraphQL API built in Elixir. In videos 4 and 5 we implemented free GraphQL mutations for toggling, editing and deleting videos. In this video we will implement what is arguably the most difficult of them all, creation. Since the application we have built is already looking suspiciously similar to iCloud reminders, let's flip over to iCloud reminders to see how their implementation works. First, there is a button at the bottom of the screen saying New Reminder. Once we click the button, a new empty reminder appears. You can also click anywhere between the last reminder and the footer. The new record is automatically focused, so we can start typing right away. Now there are two ways to submit the form. One is to press enter and this will save the record and move to the next line. Another one is and here we can just go on typing and then we can click anywhere and this will blur the form and save the record. Let's try and do something similar in our project. At this point in our project the application looks like this. I will start by displaying a button. First, in the to-do list component, let's define two new block elements. I will call the first one a footer, and I will give it a class to-do underscore list underscore footer. And inside it, I will define a new component called new to-do button. And of course, this new to-do button doesn't exist yet. And above this footer, I will define a spacer, and it will be just a div with a class to-do underscore list underscore spacer. This will be the clickable space above the footer. Now I add a missing import for import new to-do button from ./new to-do button. Obviously, this file doesn't exist yet, so let me go on and create it. New to-do button.tsx. And inside this file, I will create a boilerplate component called new to-do button, and it will return a button with a class of new to-do button and the text new reminder. And let me save it. And when you go back to the browser, the new button should appear. We will have to write quite a lot of CSS, so I think it's a good time to refactor some of our style sheets. So at the moment in the CSS directory we have this app.scss file, and it does contain some code in classical CSS syntax, and I would like to convert it to Sass. First, I rename the file to app.sass, and then I remove all the curly braces, I remove all the semicolons, and I remove all the closing curly braces. Oops. And I clear it up. This breaks the build because in app.tsx we import app.scss file, which doesn't exist anymore. So I will change this import, and when we go back to the browser, this should work again. And the way I usually work with Sass files is that there is this block, which is the main class name, and I try to put all related CSS rules in the same file. And when there is a new block, I declare a new file. So this is what I'm going to do now. In this directory, I create a file called new to-do button.sass, and I import this file in app.sass. Import new to-do button. By the way, in Sass syntax files we don't need to use double quotes, so I'll just remove the surrounding double quotes. Inside this file, let me write some styling for the new to-do button to see if it works. So I will set a font color and border. I set border to none and outline to none and background to none. There is this thing that I'm using the font Nunito quite a lot, and it would probably make sense to define it as a variable. So I will create another file called _variables.sas. From now on I will put all variables inside this file. Let me import this file above. And from this to-do list I move this to the new file. I call this variable font emph for emphasized, and in here I'll use this variable. And now in the new to-do button SAS, I can use this new font family by saying weight 600, 17 pixels, and font emphasized. Another thing is that we should move this thing down. So the way I would normally do it is using flexbox. So let's just assume that this space is to-do list. So I can say that this to-do list is a vertical flexbox and has the height of the whole screen. So this would be 100 VH, and we have to accommodate for the margins. So let me quickly go to to-do list, and in here there is a margin, but we could actually make it padding. And now we should remove the margins all around. And what's this? Where is this margin coming from? I don't know. But I guess it may be coming from this. It's coming from these alerts. So let me quickly go to the layout and remove the alerts. Now this issue is solved, and I can set a minimal height on this component by saying minimal height is 100 VH, and in here I make it a flexbox. Now I change the flex direction to column. And then for this spacer I set to-do list spacer, I set flex to 1, and this means that everything else will be pushed down. Apparently it isn't working because of the padding. So I have to set box sizing border box, and now it works. Another thing is that this thing is going outside of the edge. So I think it is because the to-do item is too wide. So let me quickly make it set display to flex, and it shouldn't go outside of the border anymore. Nope. That's here. Not here. Now it works. And one thing in iCloud reminders, this line on the right actually goes to the edge of the screen. So let me remove this right padding. The shorthand syntax for this will be 2rem 0 2rem and 2rem. And now this line is going to the right side of the screen. Another thing is when you go to this iCloud reminders, there is this icon, and we could try to recreate the look of this icon with fonts, but I know a much simpler way. We can this is an SVG, so I'll just copy the outer HTML of the SVG and put it in a file. So it is possible to do the same thing using SVG loaders, but TypeScript doesn't like it, so I'll just create a new component. So I'll call it a new plus icon maybe. And in here I define another boilerplate component and I call it plus icon. And inside it I return the SVG content. And there is one thing, that this fill dash rule has to be converted to camel case. And there won't be any props, so we can just remove this. So now when we go to new to the button, we can define inside this element, we can define a div or a span and call it new to the button icon. And inside this icon we can insert this plus icon and we need to import it. Now when we go back to the application, we see this huge plus and we will have to style it a bit. So first, in this new to the button, let me define a selector for new to the button __ icon. And as far as I remember, it has the height of 22 pixels. And we will also need to apply it to an SVG inside it. Then the SVG had the fill of white, and the new to the button icon had the background which was equal to current color. Then it had a border radius of 50% and overflow hidden. Now let's center the icon inside it by using display flex, justify content center, and align items center. Oh, it's inline flex apparently. And this thing also is inline flex. And now this new to the button icon has a margin right of 12 pixels. And another thing I noticed is that the font weight used in here is much thinner than what we have in here. And right now we are only in our app.sas, we are only importing the weight 800. So go to app.sas, and in here before 800 add 600 and a semicolon, and now it should also import the font weight of 600. Now that we have this button displayed, let's try to make it work. So in to-do list.tsx, I will define a new state, and I call it show form, and I'm using use state and give it the default value of false. And as you remember, use state returns an array with two values, and the first one is the current value of a state, and the second one is a function to set a state. So set show form, and down here After this to-do list, we can also say if show form is true, then return a new to-do form, and if not, return null. Now, of course, new to-do form doesn't exist at the moment, so we have to do the same thing as we did just now. Import new to-do form from /new to-do form, and in here we define a new component, new to-do form.tsx, and inside it we define a boilerplate, new, and here we return a form with a class of to-do list __ item, and at this point it's still not displaying. Okay, this is because in to-do list we have not imported useState. Now it does display. And new to-do form component, actually it looks very similar to a to-do item, but I decided that since it has completely different logic behind it, I will just render it as a separate component. So inside it we need to add a button and give it a class of to-do item __ toggle, and next to it there is an input with a class to-do _item __ content. And let's try it out. Oh, right now the form isn't showing, so I guess we need to actually add this action to the new to the button. So in this new to the button we can say on click, we can pass it a prop of on click, and it will be setting show form to true. Well, let's go back to new to the form, new to the button, and give it a prop of on click, which doesn't accept any arguments and returns void. And in here let's destructure it from props and pass it to the button. So now if I press new reminder, it should display this thing. Apparently it doesn't look exactly like what I was expecting, probably because I have misspelled some class name. Let me see. To-do list item. Okay, it should have the class of to-do _ item, and I will also give it another class just to distinguish it. New to-do form. And now if you press it, it should look exactly like the previous ones. Another thing we want to do is give it autofocus. So now it's automatically focused. Let's make it a controlled input. So in here I also import useState, and let me define new state, const content and set content equals useState, starting with an empty string when the value is equal to the content, and on change is setting the content to the value of the target of this event. Let's see. Now I can type on it. but when I submit, nothing happens. So this will be the next thing we have to implement. But first, I have noticed that Emacs is complaining about React, and it turns out that it is because React is a common JS module, and I haven't defined a tsconfig file. So let me quickly create a new tsconfig file in that JS directory. And inside it, I specify compiler options with target ESNext and ES module interoperation to true, allow JS to true, JSX to React. And now, what does it complain about? Cannot use, okay, it works. So now we should have auto-completion for TypeScript working correctly. And I'll delete this. I'll quickly do 2 more CSS rules for these components. The first one is removing this background, and the second one is changing the cursor for this. It should be cursor pointer, and to do this, and the toggle should have a background transparent. Also, this border is a bit too light, so let's try BBB, or maybe even AAA. Okay, now this has a nice pointer cursor, and this works kind of nice. Now in this new to the form, we will have to use a mutation. And one thing about the mutation is that when we started building the application, I didn't realize that we will be needing the actual to-do item after we create it. So I made it return just a boolean, and this is my fault. And let's quickly change the type to the item. And in here, the only thing we have to do is just remove the case. And now it should work just fine. So if we open the GraphQL playground and try to call this mutation, we should get the whole data of it to the item. This works just fine. So let me just copy it over to our new to-do form component, and in here I import the GQL tag from Apollobus, and I import use mutation from React hooks, and let's define the mutation. Const create to-do item equals GQL, and I just paste it in here. And then inside the new to the form, I have to use this this mutation. So I call this hook create to do, and I pass it the create to the item. Now things should still be rendering. And in here, let's define a callback. And this will be the callback to handle submit. So I call it onSubmit. And this accepts a form event. And it doesn't automatically get imported. And right now the first thing you want to do is prevent default, and afterwards let's check if the content is, after trimming, is not empty. And if it isn't, let's call this create to do with the variables content equal to content to the trimmed content. And we pass the onSubmit callback to the form. And right now, when I try to run it, oh, it did work. It's just that nothing happened afterwards. The next thing we have to do after actually mutating it is we'll have to update the cache. The second argument to use mutation is the configuration object, and it accepts an option called update. This is the update callback, and the first argument is the cache, and the second argument is the mutation data. So we can destructure the object to extract the create to do item and call it new to do. And inside it, we have to basically do the same thing we did in the delete mutation, which is to say we need to fetch the items from the cache and rewrite the cache. So I'll just copy it over in here. We need to import the mutation, the query, and then we can just change it to do, change this section to the items. To the items with a concatenated new to do. Okay, and let's see if it works. It did work, but it didn't clear the input. So this is the next thing we're going to have to do. And we can just say set content to an empty string. And it worked just fine. In this video we have implemented a huge part of this feature. There are quite a few more details left to implement, such as displaying the new to the form after clicking on this spacer, or hiding the form when you don't need it. I will cover these aspects in the next video. You can also try to do this on your own, and I think it's a good exercise. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.